Assalamu alaikum. This is lecture 12 of web design and development, and in this lecture I am going to continue the discussion of client-side scripting and the JavaScript document object model. Lecture contents include the JavaScript event handling, that how you are going to handle the events generated by different HTML elements such as form, buttons, or input element text change, mouse over, etc. The element selection is the most important element in the DOM architecture, and it can be done using the CSS selectors or any other selectors specified by the JavaScript. And we will discuss the Windows sub-items such as history, navigator, and form objects here. So event handling refers to the handling of events generated by the elements of your web page. So to access the HTML elements using the document object model, there are several methods that are offered by the object documents. The most important and the most widely used is the document uh, dot get element by ID, and then you specify the ID of a specific element. It accesses one element using its identification. If you want to access number of elements by tag name, you can do using the get elements by tag name and then specify a tag name, such as if you want to access all the hyperlinks, you can specify get elements by tag name and specifying the tag A, and it will get all the elements of the given tag as an array of objects. Similarly, if you want to get elements by name, you can specify the method get element by name and then specify the name of elements. It will also return an array of the objects containing all elements whose attribute name is equal to the given argument. Query selector method returns the first element that corresponds to the selector. This function takes the parameter of a string representing a CSS selector. So you can use any of the CSS selector discussed in the CSS lecture, and you can select the elements based on those CSS selectors. You can also use the query selector all method, and it returns an array of all the elements corresponding to the given selector. If you want to get the attribute of a specific element, you can use the get attribute method with any of the above method. So for example, if you want to get the attribute of a element, you can use the document dot get element by ID. This will provide you the element. Then you can call the get attribute method of those accessed element and provide the attribute name. So for example, if you want to access the image source, you can first get the image by specifying get element by ID, and then ID of uh, our image tag may be pic, and then you get the source attribute of the element to get the information about the URL of your image. Similarly, you can set the attribute using the set attribute method, and you can specify the value of your uh, attribute by specifying a new value. So this also can be done by accessing the element and then setting the attribute and specifying the attribute name and the value. For example, if you want to change the image, like in this example, to a new image, you can use the document dot get element by ID and access the same image, and then set its attribute of source to a new image called abc.jpg. So it will change the background of the image tag. So this example shows the element and a query selector, that how you can access the elements using the DOM object model. So here is a HTML file. It contains HTML tag and a header tag and a body tag, and in the head tag there is only a title. In the body tag we have a div named as my menu, and the menu says menu 1, menu 2, and then we have another div called pub, and it says pub 1, pub 2, and then we have a content, it is which specifies that here is my content, and then we have uh, another form specifying type of password and button specified name. So here is an output. You can see menu 1, menu 2, pub 1, pub 2. Here is my content, some text and two text boxes with a button. So the first method is accessing by ID. So it says you can access the document get element by ID, and then you give the ID of main menu. So this element will be accessed and stored in this variable. Similarly, you can get element by tag name, and you can call the method of get element by tag name and provide the tag div. This will provide an array of elements with all the divs. That means this div and this one, and if there is another one, this one will be accessed and stored in the variable name get element by tag name. You can also get element by name, and this is done by the third method, document dot get elements by name, and you can provide the name known as my name. So my name is a form, and it has a name my name, and it will give you a list of elements in the form. The next line shows that you can write the console log, and the result will be displayed in the console box. So you can access the elements in a array using iteration through a for loop, and you get the for loop starting from 0, and then get elements by tag name dot length, and you console dot log the name of each tag name in the logs. Similarly, you can iterate the elements by tag name, which is also an array, and you can iterate the elements in the tag elements by name array. This example shows the selection of elements using a query selector. First example shows that the document.query selector is used, and the CSS selector head and title is specified. So in this example we have the name of tags known as head and title, and the first elements will be selected called head and title. The next query selector all provides three query selectors. It says that select the elements with the ID of main menu, which is again here. Then select the uh, items with the class dot item, which is another div down the main menu, and then select the spans, which are down to the item class, and similar to the here. And then you can again iterate over the list of items to display what items you have selected. So here two examples are done for you, and one task is given you to perform it on your own. So first example is a change pick method. and it actually changes the image of a image tag. When you hover over the image, it will flip and a new image will be displayed, and when you move the cursor out of the image, the same original image will be displayed. So method states that whenever this method will be called, you get the element by ID and you access the pick element and set its source property to an image source provided by the caller or through argument. So we have a page with the image, and it has a source of image img6 and it has the ID of pick. So this will be accessed using the ID element by ID method. So we have two methods here. First is called on mouse move. That means when the mouse moves to the image, we call the method and say it change pick and provide it with the image of img7. So whenever the mouse will enter the image, this method will be called and the new image will be set. Another event is called on mouse out. When the mouse will be moved out of the image, the change method will be called, change pick will be called, and the same original image file will be paused and the image will be restored with the original image. So this is known as image rolling. That means whenever you moved the image, it will roll to another image, and when you move out, it will be a original image. The next example shows a slideshow. So this can be done using number of pictures. For example, we have array of pictures which is specified by the pix new array, and we have img1, img2, im3, img4, and img5. So we had a method for the new pick known as function npick, and we have two variables known as count is equal to 0 and p count is equal to picture counts, that will be equal to pix dot length, that means length of the array. So whenever this method will be called, we increment in the count to uh, actually display the next image. So if count is less than total length, we set document.pick.source is equal to pics of count. Otherwise, if we reach to the end of the array, for example, if we reach to the image 5, we reset the count to 0 and set the first image to the image tag. So we also set another button for the previous pick, and we do the opposite. For example, in the above example we did the increment, here we did the decrement, and we check that if count is greater than -0, we set the count, and if we reach to the 0th image, we set the count value to the p of count -1, that means length -1, and then we set the last image. So you can create your HTML form which will have an image and a button for previous and a button for next. So whenever you click on the next method, you have to call npick method, and whenever you click on the previous method, you have to call ppick method. So it can be done by specifying the on click property of image tag as specified by on mouse move property here, and you specify the ppick method. So this task is left for you. You have to design an image preview task. That means whenever you click on a small image, for example, you are given with 4 images, and whenever you click on the image, the main image is displayed here, and when you click on this image, the image changes, and when you click on this image is displayed, and so on, such as image preview task. So you can also use the attribute selector to select the list of elements. There are some useful attributes that help extracting DOM elements. So commonly node types gets the type of DOM or node in the form of numbers such as element, attribute, and text. And node name actually gets the name of the element using the upper case. Other attributes go through the DOM such as parent node enables you to access the parent node of the element, and you can get the first child, last child, child nodes, siblings, previous sibling, next sibling, etc. depending upon the position of your current element. So event handling is also handled by the document object module, and it allows JavaScript to register different event handlers on the element in the HTML document. As you have seen in the previous example that you can manually specify on click method or on mouse move method, and you have also specified on mouse out method. It can be done in other ways. Events are normally used in combination with functions, and the function will not be executed before the event occurs, such as when the user clicks a button. So whenever you register an event, you provide a function that in case the event is called, a function will be called to process some request. So every DOM element has its own add event listener method and remove event listener method. Add event listener method allows you to add the event, and it will listen specifically on that element on which you are adding the event. And remove event listener, that will remove your event handler from that specific element. So there are two examples done for both adding and removing event listeners. For example, here's a button called with the text called click me, and there is no event handler here, so we specified in the paragraph. We specify the event in the script tag, and we get the button by the document.querySelector button, and it will return us a button because there is only one button in the page so far. So button dot add event listener click, we added the click event listener, and we provided the function that whenever the button is clicked, the button click message will be displayed in alert box. Now remember, if there are more than one button, this event listener will be added to all the buttons placed in the HTML document. When you want to remove the event listener, you can take this example. Again, we had select the button called uh, using the query selector, and we had a function called once, and we have console done, and we then specified that button dot remove event listener and click, and we have specified the method once. Similarly, you can again add the event listener after removing the one. So events are propagated from one element to another. DOM elements can be nested inside each other, and somehow the handler of the parent works even if you click on its child. So for example, if you have a div element and then in div element you have a button, if you click on the button, the event of the div will also work. So event propagation is done in all browsers except Internet Explorer less than 9. So there are two stages of event propagation. In the first, the event goes from the topmost element to the innermost element, known as capturing. For example, if we have a div and in the div we have a form, and in the form we have a button. So this, if you click on the button, the event is captured from div to form to button. So after then it bubbles up to trigger the parent in the nesting order, so called bubbling. So whenever you click on the event, it will bubble the events. For example, it will first call the event of the button, then it will call the event of the form if there is any, and then it will call the event of a div if you have specified any function for the div. So all methods of event handling ignore the first phase and they do the second phase by default. Using add event listener with the last argument true is the only way to catch the event at the capturing, which is most often is not used. The event object has a target property referring to the node where they are originated. So there are a number of events that you can use, for example, on mouse over, on blur, on focus, on select, on change, on submit, etc. And they fire on the specific change of elements in the HTML document. The list goes on and there are so many methods to choose from. So here is a task for you that you have to create a to-do list using the HTML and your JavaScript code. So first of all, you have to create the interface looking like this, or you can make a better interface, create an interface, and then you add a event listener to add button that whenever you click on this button, an element is added to a to-do list. Also add an event to modify button whenever you click on this event, this button, an already added to-do list is modified. Then on the delete button, add an event listener to delete the item from the list, and then add toggle completed to complete or uncomplete the task. Then toggle all will also add an event listener to toggle all button. That means if all the items are undone, then the toggle all button will make them done. In the step 3, the task will be displayed an unordered list and under the form. So every modification list is immediately impacted on the display. So that is the actual working of JavaScript on the client side. The other elements Windows provide is history. The history object contains the URL visited by the user within a browser window. The history object is a part of window object and it is accessed through window.history property. So it is an example of going forward and backward on the URL of a page. So for the going forward, you said window.history.forward method, and if you want to go to the back to the previous URL, you can use the window.history.back method, and it is implemented on click of go back and on click of go forward. History object contains the URL visited by the user. The history object is a part of window object and it is accessed through the window.history property, and it is provides some useful properties such as length, which returns the number of URL in the history list. Back and forward you have already seen, and go method loads the specific URL from the history list. Navigator object contains the information about the browser, and it provides several properties that assist the detection of various elements of visitor browser and the environment. For example, app.codename returns the code name of the browser, and app.name returns the name of the browser, and version returns the version information of the browser. So it can be accessed using the navigator.appname and navigator.appversion, etc. The final element is the form element, and the form object reference to the HTML form. For each form tag in an HTML document, a form object is created. The browser creates a form array which keeps the number of form objects in the HTML program. The first form object in the HTML file is indexed at 0 and the second is 1 and so on. So if you can access using the document.forms and then you specify which form you are accessing. For example, the first form is indexed at 0 and then you specify the name.value to anything and then you can access the element 0 and then specify the element's value, etc. If you want to read more, you can read the chapter 11 of this recommended book, or you can look at the another book called A Modern Introduction to Programming Eloquent JavaScript. If you have any question, you can ask me through any of designated medium, or you can conduct a question and answer session. Thank you very much.